The United Kingdom's Foreign Office Minister says he's concerned about the events in Cairo and added restraint and dialogue are more urgent than ever. The European Union is calling on authorities to show restraint. And Germany has urged all sides in Egypt to renounce violence. Let's bring in Shadi Hamid, who's the Director of Research of the Brookings Doha Center. They're all calling on everybody to show restraint, but that's not what we're seeing, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, these are kind of odd statements to be hearing from the leading powers of the international community to act as if there are two sides that are equally matched and fighting each other. No, what we're seeing here is a deadly crackdown, and the military and the police forces in Egypt using very aggressive force. And contrary to what some in the Egyptian government say, there may have been isolated cases of some protesters having arms, but these were not armed sit-ins. They were, for the most part, peaceful and civil and so on.
Why the need, excuse me jumping in here, for this excessive force?
Well, there was no other way to disperse the sit-ins. So if that was in fact...
Because there was going to be a phased way of evacuating them, wasn't there? There was discussion that that was the way to go.
Yeah, well, even if you try a phased approach, the Morsi supporters were really adamant about digging in. I just got back from Egypt the other day. I spent time in Rabat meeting with Muslim Brotherhood officials, and they were very clear about this, that they were willing to quote-unquote die for their cause if that's what it came down to. So you can't, there was no way to physically remove them without using force. So I think that this was an inevitable consequence of a chain of events that came earlier. And again, if the military was making that their goal, and they were very clear about that, we didn't know when, but at some point they said this had to be cleared, so violence was inescapable, unfortunately. So that's where we're at right now. And right now what we're seeing is the disappearance of even the slightest hope of national reconciliation. And as I've been saying, I mean, no one is going to sit down on a table and negotiate under fire. The Brotherhood isn't going to have any faith in the political process when they're being gunned down in at least the dozens, and it seems like the death count is rising. So I'm really worried that this is the end of the beginning of this new phase in Egyptian history, if you will.
You talk about the political process. I mean, what political process? You know, I know that there's a roadmap underway, but
well, there was some hope.
It's not all inclusive, is it?
Yeah, I mean, there was some hope before the events of today that somehow there could be a mediation effort, and that's why the U.S. and the EU and others were in Cairo in recent weeks to try to see if there was any way to bridge the gap. So there was a kind of faint glimmer of hope, and what that would look like is you release the senior leaders of the Brotherhood and unfreeze their assets, make certain guarantees that if the Brotherhood does come back into the political process, their rights will be protected, they'll be able to contest elections. That was the broad outline of a kind of understanding, but that's all done now.
Isn't it just, I mean, the future of the Muslim Brotherhood, and maybe this is a little early to talk about that now, but we know that some have been arrested. We've got high-level leaders still under arrest. There's very little chance that they're going to be brought into any process, it seems.
Exactly, and I think the Army and the Ministry of Interior have made a very conscious decision to try to dismantle the organization.